to me, good garbage is garbage that you can look your children in the eye and say, I didn't hurt you.
Hello. Welcome to the Good Garbage Podcast. My name is Ved Krishna. My primary reason for existence has been to find ways to leave our wonderful planet cleaner. We will be speaking with material innovators, creators, and propagators to learn from them how we can build for scale and towards a regenerative future. Their stories will help us answer the big question, what is good garbage? Recording in person is always more fun. Scott Bolin, the founder of TerraSafe's Materials, and I met on the sidelines of Rethinking Materials in London recently. Scott has such a diverse background, having explored literature and history and also having taught the same. He has dabbled with various entrepreneurial ventures, from absorbent materials for the hygiene industry to founding Next Century Spirits, a liquor company. TerraSafe now works on solving the challenge of translating an idea to application and then to a business. They have had recent success with Dissolves, which is now in the commercial space with laundry detergent packaging. This is a wide-ranging and insightful discussion, and I'm sure you will enjoy connecting with Scott if you have ideas that you are nurturing. Enjoy the conversation. Go. Hello, Scott. So wonderful to have you with us and do this in person. This is going to be a lot more fun. So Scott, of course, is the president of Dissolves and the founding CEO of TerraSafe. So starting with, why are you here, Scott? Why Rethinking Materials?
Well, we came here last year and we had a really good experience just kind of getting our toes wet in the industry. The company had only been around for about 6 months. So this time we're coming back, showing the progress. So it's no longer AI imagery, it's actual things. And we getting ready to launch our first external funding round. So kind of our coming out party.
Oh, that's great. I'm sure you'll find a lot of good things happening in the world that Rethinking congregates together. So let's step back.
Yep.
Let's talk about your growing up years. Where did you grow up? What were the early influences? What got you here?
I have a kind of an unusual background. I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina. Like all good garbage entrepreneurs, I did a degree in English at the College of William & Mary, where there are no engineers whatsoever. And then I spent 4 years teaching English and history, mainly Western civilization. And I love teaching, but the thing about teaching is when you do it really well, they tell you to do the exact same thing again.
Mm-hmm.
And after a few years of that, I kind of got tired of it. And so I went to business school at North Carolina State University for my MBA, and they have a degree in technology commercialization. So especially really in bringing IP to market as an entrepreneur. So jumped into that and been kind of doing materials ever since.
Amazing. And I was wondering if, you didn't even just major in English and history. I think you did Shakespeare. And thinking, are you going to Stratford upon Avon or doing some of that here?
We're debating going to the Globe, which is about a mile from here. They have a Western version of Romeo and Juliet. So I don't know if it's different cowboy hats or we'll see like Native Americans. I'm not sure what's going to happen there. But yeah, we'll do that whole thing. So I love coming to England for that stuff.
And of course, North Carolina State has an amazing pulp and paper program as well. So that didn't attract you at all?
I didn't know about it until I came to NC State, and then I have founded 2 companies with a professor out of pulp and paper.
Oh, well, I have a debating friend. I hope that's not him, Medwick Bird. So he actually, I think he heads it now, I think. But yeah.
He might have taken over from my guy, Joe Pollock.
Oh, yeah.
Been there.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Small world. So why entrepreneurship? Of course, a lot of people go and do MBAs and then, not many teachers probably do that. Not many history teachers for sure. But it seems like you had the entrepreneurship bug all along or something. How did that happen?
Well, a lot of it came from my dad. When I was growing up, I think a lot of fathers in the United States talk about sports figures, and my dad certainly did that. But he worked at Xerox, and in the 80s, Steve Jobs had wandered through Xerox and seen the first graphical user interface computer, and it just captivated my dad's imagination, just the founding of Apple. And so he would talk about the founding of Apple Computer at the dinner table every night. And so we just grew up talking about entrepreneurship, even though he was an entrepreneur, he's in sales and medical device. And so I just kind of started there. And the reason I stick around is it's just the ultimate act of creative energy, right? You can write plays, you can do, I play guitar, I do all kinds of creative activities, but creating something out of nothing is the best thing you can possibly do. And so that's what keeps me coming back to entrepreneurship over and over again.
I'm glad you defined it like that. I feel better about myself already.
It's an addiction. I tell people it's, I don't know how you do it, but I'll go back and forth. I'll tell my wife I'm never doing this again. And then a week later, I'm like, oh, man, I want to do it.
Exactly. So I see a bunch of other companies that you did, and it's a wide variety. So Anovo, Tethys, I don't know if I'm saying it right, and then Next Century Spirits, and those are very different businesses. So how did that whole journey come about? What was that experimentation?
Well, I tell people, if there were ever a nuclear war, there'd be, share cockroaches and me trying to start companies. And so a lot of it came from just a refusal to give up on what we're working on. So my first company, Tethys, was named after the Greek goddess of fresh water. It was about actually garbage, wastewater in the oil and gas industry. We created this great bio-based material that would take wastewater and turn it into a solid mass, so you could take it to a regular landfill as opposed to taking it to a water treatment plant. And so we found that the oil and gas industry was spending $1 billion trucking dirty water across state lines, and those truck drivers were dumping the water on the side of the road. Just horrible situation. It's basically nobody's responsibility. So we called them up and said, hey, if you could convert this salt into a solid waste, would you be interested? And they very much were. The problem was it didn't work. We worked on it for about a year. We had 2 weeks of funding left, and we came to the conclusion there was just no way we're ever going to make this material work. So I'm sitting there as an English teacher turned chemical entrepreneur going, what am I going to do here? So we went back to our board and said, hey, give us 2 weeks to find something else to do with this technology. We went into the lab, and I said, what's that weird sample in the back? It looks like goo. And they said, oh, that's a failed sample. I said, what do you mean a failed sample? And they said, well, instead of pulling the salt out of the water, it's pulling all the salt water in, and it's turning into a gel. And I said, well, that's kind of neat. What is that? And they said, well, we don't know, maybe a super absorbent polymer. I said, well, I don't know what that is. What is that? And they said, well, it's the material that goes into diapers. And it turns out that in the diaper industry, which is, of course, a huge garbage source, the one ingredient that gets less sustainable every year is the super absorbent. It's the one that they can't make more sustainable, and we had accidentally created the world that's bio-based virgin. So we spent 5 years scaling that up, and right in the middle of our Series C to go to pilot, the professor, Dr. Pollack, came to me and said, Scott, I've been thinking a lot about bourbon, and I thought he finally snapped. Yeah, and it's a weird thing to say in a diaper oil and gas industry lab. And it turned out that no one had ever asked a pulp and paper professor what happens between the alcohol in the wood in a barrel to take it from clear to brown, and actually worked out the science behind that. And he said, well, anyway, I think I figured it out, and I think I can simulate that with a machine. And I said, okay, like really quickly? He said, really quickly. How quickly? An hour. Oh, wow. And I said, okay, well, that's nothing to do with diapers and nothing to do with oil and gas. How much will it take to try? He said, $10. And so I pulled out one Alexander Hamilton, and in the middle of our $17 million Series C, I'm doing 9 minutes on how we're going to save the world's dumps from getting rid of diapers and oh, by the way, we've got bourbon. And so the board came to me and said, look, we like you a lot, but you're not Elon Musk. You've got to pick one of these two companies. Yeah. And, I was really torn because I spent 5 years growing this business, and I got to revenue, finally got this big fundraising. And I was sitting in a meeting about what kind of bag we'd put the material in, and I could feel my brain kind of leaving my body. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to take the liquor company. And so we founded Next Century Spirits to provide a way to bring a lower cost alcohol to the industry. And we found that was a need that was not necessary. It turns out the bourbon industry has $1 billion of barrels aging, but what they can't do is they can't launch new brands. And so after about 4 years, we started launching new brands. And so we did deals with Greg Norman, the golfer, and the guy from Suits and everything else. And so it became more of a brand owning company. So it really was just me and the inventor, Dr. Pollack, continuing to just kind of plug away at ideas and launch things. And so that's how those companies all come.
So, yeah, I know. I was thinking about a friend's brother who actually grew up being a moonshine guy in West Virginia.
Really?
And then, of course, we would think, what would come off him? This guy is just going to ruin his life. And he became a huge brewer. He's probably one of the biggest in West Virginia, at least even now. And he was just a moonshine guy making this thing and, getting his friends drunk or what have you.
That's funny. I was born in West Virginia. I'm like, oh, wow. I'm like, respect. I was born in Charleston. Okay. And my other half of my family is in Point Pleasant, home of the Mothman.
Okay.
That's Man House Moths.
Okay. I did not know that. But my wife grew up in Elkins.
Okay.
So we visit there a lot. And yeah, at least every summer we are there. They have this festival that happens in Elkins.
Yep.
I'm forgetting the name. And my wife loves Zydeco dancing.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of bands that come through Cajun and Zydeco. We have to be there every July. So it's her parents are still.
I very rarely run into people that
It's amazing. And we even made her ship to India. So we said, it's because she was a hillbilly, she fitted right in. We said, we have no pipe toilets and stuff like that, and you'll just be fine. She said, yeah, totally.
Well, ironically, a lot of our investment thesis around Next Century was going to India because
Interesting. And I heard that there was an India connect.
I was for about 4 years the CEO of Next Century Spirits India, where I learned a lot about Indian regulatory.
And there's a lot.
The government has mastered red tape to a level that I cannot believe.
You cannot, yeah, especially in alcohol.
I would get on video once a month, or once a quarter, and read this pre-made script about how I would be compliant with the Maharashtra Stamp Act of 2013, which had to do with how I mailed in our documents, which we physically mailed anything, and that I think it's something like 1.8 billion liters of whiskey are consumed in India.
It's crazy.
Yeah, times the size of the U.S. It's twice the size of the rest of the world, but because of the temperatures, it's very difficult to age whiskey. So we got one of our machines in there. We learned that sending machines over and said made in China was probably not the wisest thing. We learned a lot of valuable lessons foray into India.
And it's so interesting because it's such a puritanical society. And then you have governments who are relatively even I would say religious fanatics. And then they would go ahead and even say that, any sugar mill that is making alcohol, 25% of that alcohol has to be converted to country liquor by law. And it's crazy, right? You're trying to get more country liquor in at cheap rates because you want more tax, right? So it's so interesting, the warp that happened.
Working all that out was a nightmare for us from the outside in. That was,
I can't even imagine.
Trying to do it sort of quasi-remotely was a mistake, but
yeah. No, even if you were there, my brother actually lived in the US for many years and then decided with all our pushback, decided to come and set up couple of businesses in India. Could not do it. Had to shift it to Africa.
Really?
And loves it there. Yeah, it was very easier. So it loves it there. So India is that complicated, but we won't get into that. So talk to me about TerraSafe and how did that happen after the Spirit experience? And something must have come calling to take you this direction.
Something did come calling, a venture capital fund. Okay, so Big Idea Ventures is a global fund primarily in the alternate meat space. And several years ago, they were dealing with a number of potential investors in the rural banking community in the United States that wanted to invest in startups that were in a rural location and didn't have an opportunity to. So Big Idea created a fund called the Generation Food World Partners. I don't know what that means. They internally call themselves GFOP. I just go with it.
Yep.
But what the model is it's actually a venture studio model. So they acquired an AI that allows them to look across the entire spectrum of university tech transfer offices. So scaling back a little bit, I'm one of the few people that actually use their degree as intended. My specialty is licensing university IP and bringing it to market. That's what my degree is in. I'm actually teaching the course. And
yeah, so you continue to be a teacher.
I'm going back into it. I can't get away from it. So I'll be teaching that in the fall. But what is very difficult about that is universities are not really designed to market their technologies. And they're not really set up for the professor to take it all the way into the market. And you would get, in a packaging company would know, a lot of great innovations that are distantly from the market. My world is getting it from the professor's brilliant idea out of the lab code, off of the table, into the marketplace. It's difficult to find great technologies. The FUD created an AI that would scrape all the universities for interesting solutions. And then what it did was it would synthesize a portfolio of IP, not from one university, but from many.
Huh.
So we were the first model. They called me up and said, you have a background in this kind of technology. We'd like you to solve packaging. I'm like, I don't know a lot about packaging, but I do know something about biomaterials. What part of packaging? And they said, well, all of it. Yeah. And I'm like, well, that's like a $3 trillion market by 2030. Can we be more specific? And they said, no, you have a pretty broad mandate, but here are a couple different categories of interest. Getting rid of PFAS coating, getting rid of foams that are expanded polystyrene, those kinds of things. And so we've created this bucket, not of one professor and one technology, but three universities, Purdue, Penn State, and NC State. And instead of one technology, we want you to license 25 of them all at once. So 4 patent families, 25 patents, bring them all together. And at first I was skeptical, right? Doing one thing for 5 years. I used to have hair, then I tried one thing. But then I actually came here and I started talking to innovation managers. And what I found is if you're on the corporate side, you're trying to solve sustainable packaging, you've got 2 really bad choices. You can either go to the big guys, the BASFs of the world, and they assure you they will get you the sustainable solution you need in 2 years or whatever the amount of time it is for them to move out of their job, right? And we see corporate sustainability standards not being met year after year after year because no one is incentivized to cannibalize their existing CapEx to switch. Or you can come to Rethink Materials and you can talk to startups. But the problem with those startups is they're like my original startup, which is they have one solution and packaging is a really complex problem. And so you are faced with an unfortunate circumstance where if you'd like to replace a candy wrapper, you probably need to pull 5 different startups together, knowing at least one of them is going to die before you get to market, and the other 2 are insane, right? And so that's, to me, that was the inertia discovery, right? Because there's tons of money chasing sustainable packaging. It's a bipartisan global issue. There was a recent study that found that the amount of microplastic in our brains, 30% in the last 8 years, we start every pitch deck with a human that's turned into a fork. And I have small children, and I do not want to have my children have 2 forks in their heads by the time they're grown up. Yeah. So it's this universally true thing that we want more sustainable packaging. It's not happening because asking a packaging company or CPG to bolt together a bunch of early stage startups all at once to get that package all done is really hard because just having one piece of the puzzle is really insufficient, right? You can do incremental improvement, but does it really get you there? So that's what really turned me on to it. After Rethink, I really hit the gas and we licensed all that technology. And then we started doing acquisition as well, because what we found is a lot of those startups I was telling you about, they saw something that we had, which they didn't, which is a really experienced team. So I'd managed to pull together a team. I think there are 4 former CEOs, more than a dozen startups represented, over $100 million in venture capital raised from multiple different people on the team, multiple products commercialized. And so a lot of these inventors, they're very ideologically driven. They're usually pretty technical. They started coming to us and saying, hey, can we come in? And so we actually acquired Dissolve, which is why 2 times. So we're going to merge now, so I don't have to bring 2 cards. Which is a great example. He'd invented, I think we're going to jump ahead to the end here, but keep going. If we're going to talk about what's the best kind of garbage, the best kind of garbage is no garbage. So this is, you're familiar with the detergent pod, right? Okay, went from 0 to 25% market share in 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah. In both detergent and in dish.
So easy to use.
Yeah, it's easy to use. Everybody loves it. I love this story. We found the guy that kind of brought it to market. He said originally the brands didn't want to do it because they were worried the consumer would actually use the right amount of material, which tells you a lot about CPGs. The problem is the coating around it to make the pod is something called polybioalcohol. It's a microplastic contaminant. It's banned here in Europe. The Australians have never seen it. New York is banning it. California is banning it. This young man who's actually here at Rethink Materials, he'll be on the panel with me. Back in 2018, wasn't thinking about laundry detergent pods. He was thinking about the mess he was making at his college dorm making protein powder. And so way back in 2018, he invented a way to make a pod out of vegan material. So what you see here is entirely bio-based.
Can I touch it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and as you know, you've talked to some of our competitors. There's quite the race to make this pod. Yep. Where this quietly is differentiated is the pods are all made in outsourced pod making facilities for the consumer products. We're the only ones actually run on this machine. So typically they have to use a custom machine and custom materials. This drops in to existing pod equipment. So we're actually at that facility right now. And so, instead of making thousands, we'll be able to make millions or tens of millions. We had a cleaning product company come to us that consumes 800 million pods a year just for cleaning supplies. And so we brought him in. We found that he'd done a great job. And I'm sorry to ramble, if that's okay. We found he did. Is this your show? Oh, Apple, that's much. Yeah. A great example of an entrepreneur, right? So he had no money. He had raised, I think, like 150 grand in 6 years. Worked out of his mom's basement. Really, talk about just endurance, resiliency. He'd outsourced the making of the film to one group, and he'd outsourced the making of the pod to the other group. And so when we acquired the company, we called them both up and they said, you know what, it's 90% of the way done. And they were both in agreement with that. What they weren't in agreement of is who was responsible for that last 10%. And it turned out the filmmakers had never made pods, and the pod makers had never worked with a novel film material before. And so it was just this never-ending blame game between two well-intentioned outsourced R&D groups. So we brought in our experienced team. Within 6 months, we got to revenue. And so so the TerraSafe model has really morphed to not just, we have a lot of IP from universities, and we're going to provide you with a lot of those. And we do. We can give you everything. We can give you one piece of it. And I've brought some things to show it felt here. But it's also that we see just this huge opportunity of all these incredible novel materials and novel technologies that are sitting in what's called the valley of death, right? It's that space in between a great invention and the marketplace where our team and our facilities are able to come in and bring those forward. I'll give you one more case study in that. So I was at a trade show, and a guy came up to me and said, "Hey, do you do laundry sheets?" And I said, "Of course we do." And then I went and Googled what a laundry sheet is. Because as a CEO, the answer is yes, until, we actually get cash flow positive. It turns out it's a laundry pod reduced to two-dimensional work. And so we use these all the time. So yeah, I'd never heard of them. It's a relatively new market. It's about $600 million market cap. Our team, when I emailed them, by the time I got home, they had a working prototype. Smells really nice. Whatever you put in there. Smells really important for the consumer. Yeah. And we were able to reduce that to practice in just about 3 weeks. We know how much it costs. We know how we make it. We're negotiating deals on it now, and just a great testament to having, working with a great inventor, really experienced team, bring it to market. And then we find partners that either want to make it themselves or we'll make it for them to bring to market. But that's why we have so much breadth, is we're able to get in there and really execute quickly. I'll show you the last thing. To me, this is the great example of the TerraSafe ethos. So getting back to that problem of multi-component. So if you want to take sushi trays, right? So black plastic is gross, yeah, right? And yet we use it on the food that is the most sensitive, which is sushi. Mm-hmm. So we have technology that allows us to take an all biomaterial, looks like plastic. This one is completely biomaterial. It's completely biomaterial. It's a cellulose, sturdy feeling. It's literally like metal. Yes. It's thermoflammable. Okay. Very easy to work with, but it doesn't do you any good unless you have a lid. So we licensed some other technology from another startup, and that one's designed to look more natural. We actually can make them more transparent than that. But if you wanted the more natural feel, and that was a funny thing. The first version of it, we went to some grocery stores and sell sushi and said, "Look at this great natural looking thing." And they said, "No, black. We want black." And so now our challenge that our board is at the Model T challenge. Any color till it's black. Yes, but then how do you get the benefit of it being a biomaterial? I actually showed this to our investors, and they threw it away. They thought it was the real sushi tray. So what we're working with our design team, and we have designers in-house, is how do you get the benefit of a biomaterial for the consumer without looking, too off of what the product really is. So it's threading that needle. Okay, Scott, you've given me about 10,000 things to unbundle now. That's unbundled. So we will unbundle them slowly. So I think let's start with the pod you first showed. You said something important. I think PVA has been something that's been used for many years. It's quite a prevalent material, but you said it has a challenge of microparticles. What I've been told so far, the PVA, PBOH family fundamentally dissolves in water into nothing. So tell us more. Tell us more about why you say that's a challenge from a materials angle. Well, I think the science has been somewhat inconclusive on it so far. And I know, at least in our go-to-market segments, we're targeting the edibles first. And, where the science ends up one way or another, I'm fairly confident the consumer doesn't want to consume polyvinyl alcohol. For detergents and others, I think it's it's the debate's still out there. I know in Europe it's always been banned. We're seeing my sense on it is if a alternative comes into existence, everyone will switch, whether or not the microplastics lands one way or the other. It's just not a desirable material to have in contact with your clothing, in contact with your food, your dishes, things like that. So.
Yeah, so two of the things that I have been told before, and I don't know if you have any ideas on that. One is it actually affects recyclability. So what I'm told is that when you actually put it in a pulper, say if you're doing a paper plus, which is a lot of the usage, it tends to kind of congregate together. It becomes like lumpy.
Yep.
So one was that. And of course, the other challenge, which as humanity we don't talk enough of, is the source, right? It's still, you still have the challenge of the petroleum source and how it comes out. So I don't know if you can throw more light on the repulpability aspect.
We haven't looked at the repulpability. Most of what we've looked at is consumability. If you look at a lot of the competitive landscape, a lot of the competitive videos and ads, you'll see a lot of clump left over.
Okay.
In the laundry machine, in the detergent, the laundry sheets actually use a little bit more polyvinyl alcohol, and so that's a very competitive landscape right now. And so look at this gross goo that's left in the container. What we try to do is, what we always do is we only use bio-based materials. And so we start, you talked a lot about the source. That's really important to us. For one thing, we have a global mindset. So recyclability standards, what you'll hear at this conference is there's a lot of debate and it's inconclusive. And so we try to make sure that we give you an option that at least, for single use, bio-based, you could recycle it in some instances, but for most of what we do, it's that single use sort of.
And what's the difference between PVA and PVOH? Is that similar family, or do you know, or because they tend to use the term interchangeable?
It's really it kind of harkens me back to my diaper days where sodium polyacrylate was called a number of different the super absorbent.
Yeah,
I have not heard the delineation between PVA and PVA. I've heard them use interchangeably.
Maybe somebody who produces it. We should check with them.
And yeah, one producer pretty much. In Japan. Yeah,
the PVA things.
For that the film coating, it's a company called Monosol.
Okay,
Cure.
Yep. That's a big company. The other one which you mentioned is fascinating again. Sometimes we find that people are trying to disrupt too many things at the same time. What you said was it can fit into the same supply chain. So how important have you found that? And I'm asking this also from a perspective of those listening and getting into the business, because many times it might be a challenge to disrupt multiple things. Or am I imagining that, or do you think it is much better to fit into a supply chain and create a material that just replaces the material and uses the same machinery? Is that something that's important or not?
It is. It starts with a discipline of what you choose to look at. So I have what I call my three-legged stool, which is probably the most banal list of standards you can imagine. But we don't bring things to market that we don't know what they cost. They need to be competitive. We don't believe in a massive grade premium. We need to know we can make a lot of it, and that kind of goes to your existing supply chain. So either we can find third-party manufacturers immediately that we can scale up with, which is true for pod, it's true for tray, it's true for sheet. And we need to know how well it performs compared to the incumbent. And we believe there's some grace there with sustainable materials, but we need to know those three things. If those three things are true, then we go through a process we call thingification. And so,
did you say that again?
Thingification. So,
just to say Shakespearean to come out.
Well,
interesting term.
Shakespeare, he's known to have invented over 250 words.
Just that? I thought it was way more.
Could be more than
No, it's way more.
You're right, it's more. It's been a while since
I'm doing like literally, some percentage of English itself. It's like a Shakespearean variation.
You're absolutely correct. There's a guy that lives in Raleigh named Elliot Ingalls who does a number of lectures on this if you get more interested. Yeah, there used to be 11 different words for the word egg on the Thames River, and because of Shakespeare, we have egg.
Yeah, it's something like that.
So hopefully one day TerraSafe will
you get that word out.
And what I'm getting at is, again, getting back to that innovator problem of getting to the market, there are many things that look like they're finished that are not. And so what we do when we look at technology is we bring in a designer that has experience in industrial design. We bring in our COO who has scale-up factories, and our CTO and our business office, we all look at it at one time and we come up with a business case for it. And so we're able to pretty rapidly work through ideas. So there is a very common, mantra that you need to focus, right? That's what every VC says. The problem with platform technologies is you will look back and regret, the choices that you made. And I know this from experience of, I picked diaper, I should have picked feminine hygiene. It was a smaller market. And by the time I'd gone through that entire exercise, I was wrong. If I'd worked in parallel, I would have, we'd all be using Tethys in our diapers because we would have found a beachhead. You have to be disciplined about it. And when I talk about thingification, I mean, we rapidly scale it up. We rapidly look at our techno-economic assessment all at one time. And so what I don't really like as a materials entrepreneur is those long, painful moments you can't get around a 3-week humidity test or those kinds of things where my brilliant, incredibly talented scientists are playing dominoes in the back because they can't do anything. So at least at my scale, which is pretty small, there's an opportunity to run things in parallel if you keep it pretty close. And then we don't compromise. So if we are only using biomaterials, we want to use prevalent ones like starches, wood flour, ag waste, some alginate, things like that. But things that are very common and prevalent, I'm not a big believer in starting off on a novel new material. I think those are really difficult to scale up. And so I want to make sure that if I go to a large packaging partner, they're not going to be wondering, am I going to have a supply chain crunch later because I can't get enough of magic ingredient number 5. So we try to keep it pretty plain Jane vanilla on that end. And so, but navigating that is really challenging. And so we have a process we go through that's pretty rigorous early on of, okay, does this fit in what we're doing? And what we acknowledge is as we move forward, our scope is going to narrow. So we have a fairly large pilot machine that does coatings and films. So right now that takes a priority. So our ability to make these sheets, that came from a pilot machine we already had. That would probably dictate future decisions because we have this great experience. So right now the world's our oyster, but that gets smaller as we can make more decisions.
I think that's a smart way to do it. Elimination instead of right in the beginning, right off the bat, choosing one thing. So you keep eliminating. In fact, I was having lunch with another friend who's been doing novel pulping technologies, and she was asking me, how am I looking at alternative materials than what we use? And I said, the first and foremost thing is 100,000 tons available.
Yeah.
So that's stage one. It's not even, and within a certain periphery, in certain radius. And only then do we even look at it. That's right. We won't even look at it if it's not easily available, because below that, we can't make a change. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. Staying with the thought of conversion or supply chain again, the other thing we find is very challenging, and I don't know if you've run against it yet, but the other thing that's very challenging is even if you use the same kind of machinery and structures, there's always a lot of adjustments that's needed. And the toolers are typically resistant to that because they don't want to adjust their heat. They've been used to a certain polymer. They don't want to change their cycle. And of course, it affects the costs immensely. And typically in the beginning, it won't be better than the current substrate because the current substrate has been optimized for 50 years, right? So do you already come across that, or is that something that's, starting?
Oh, that you put your finger on the reason why we have so many different things that we work on, because going back to my original company, Tethys, the diaper technology worked. The issue was exactly what you're talking about. You had a highly disintegrated supply chain with multiple owners of the process, none of whom were highly incentivized to change, right? And so part of why we do what we do is I don't believe it's knowable that we will have the solution to go to the right person at the right time. But if I have multiple solutions and I have the ability to go all the way end to the end consumer, I can create that kind of market pull. So for instance, I am going directly to sushi makers with this solution because I found out tool manufacturers that would work for me to do that. Would I prefer to partner with someone that already has scale? Absolutely. But what I found is the best thing to move forward a large company is the sense of inevitability. And so if it's going to happen anyway, and you're going to look foolish because you had the opportunity to be a part of it, but I've eliminated everything else for you, then you're more likely to do it as opposed to this entrepreneur has a crazy dream and I'm going to take on a lot of risk. I was very close to selling my first company, and I remember the CEO finally brought in the VP of engineering 6 months of conversation, and I looked at his face And I realized all the things that I imagined would be fairly easy were all going to be his responsibility. And he wasn't going to get a yacht. He was going to get a bonus, right? Yeah. So my objective whenever I'm talking to an end customer of any type, be it a packager, a co-packer, or a CPG, is that I want to eliminate all imagination I can possibly to do that. That to me is the best way to do it. The second is having such a wide breadth of solutions that I have just a high volume of reps. So, right now, PFAS alternative coatings are really, really interesting. There's a lot of health concerns about that. We have those, but I don't necessarily know that if I go to Rethinking Materials, I'm going to have a 100% hit rate on that. I know that I can talk to anybody here in the packaging supply chain, up or down, and I can have a conversation with them because I have something for them.
Yep.
And so just the volume of
the starting place, at least, to kind of have a
my marginal cost to do that is so low. I mean, I have 20 people and I'm able to have coherent conversations with 20 people because strong team, wide breadth of solutions, clear path to commercialization.
The Good Garbage podcast has been brought to you by Paka. Paka has been creating solutions in the food packaging, carry, and service space. Paka utilizes sugarcane residue and upcycles it into amazing products. Their latest offering is a compostable, flexible packaging solution for the chocolate and confectionery industry. The products are available in the Indian subcontinent and in North America now. Paka is also building an end-to-end solutions for customers in the food service and delivery space. For any query, do email at connect@paka.com, and Paka is Pakka. Now, back to the show. Yeah, one thing you mentioned is scale, the idea of scaling.
Yeah.
So there are two ways to go around it, right? And I wonder which one do you adapt to more? One is to find companies that are already at scale and to find them solutions that they're looking for and then adapt. Like I know that we are struggling with barriers, for example. So I'll give you a practical situation. So one of the things, so we focus a lot on trying to find solutions for long shelf life packaging, which is basically multi-layered substrates, right?
Yeah.
But I don't call it multi-layered substrates because maybe that's not the holy grail. Who knows, yes, right? So basically it's a long shelf life packaging that doesn't want to be oxidized or have moisture come in. So fundamentally the big challenge, as you will know, is barriers. So, but we are at scale. So should we be the ones coming to you, or would you typically prefer people who are starting out, but looking to at least pilot and go beyond? Or is both? How would that work?
Well, it would be really difficult for me to shortlist that way. I'd have to go both. Okay. So, you take your hypothetical, what I would tell you is my CTO worked at Weyerhaeuser, is published in the field of barrier coatings, and has a long track record. You actually know Julie Willoughby.
I have.
I think you've met her. Yeah. So long track record in this space. It's not possible for me to know which part of the barrier you necessarily are weak on. And my guess is if you were in a typical packaging company, you'd be somewhat reticent to tell me which area. What we try to provide you is we have an array of them, and here's the pathway to how we have scaled them up. If you would like to partner with us and come alongside us and license or partner with us, you can. But our sense is that we need to have a clear pathway to going all the way to market without a licensing partner. I've done that a few times. I did get some licensing revenue in my Tethys days, but my sense is the risk, for me, time is the risk. I have more money than I have time. And so what I want to do is create a scenario where I've eliminated all the things I know you're going to worry about as quickly as I can. Now, I think there's a premium to be had if you're the large company that's able to make that bet early, right? Because because I have many children, I'm happy to license something very early on because I have a long pipeline of other things I can work on, and I'm looking to prove my model. And so if there's something in my portfolio that is attractive to you that you can take on, that we can come to a deal term, it's not an existential exit scenario as opposed to most startups that you'd be dealing with where I'm a coating company. I've got to believe that you're going to create all the value that I'm ever going to see from this technology. There's a little bit more hand play in what we do. And so That means we're acting as if we're going to scale up, but we're also actively talking to anybody we think could partner with us because we have so many different things we work on.
And does Raleigh give you a benefit in having better people in terms of because of the NCSU situation, and there's a plethora of different kind of thinking people? Is that a situation?
I'm probably going to be a lifelong Raleigh entrepreneur, and you touch on one of the two reasons why. One is the immense university capital there. So NC State has, every type of, I think they have 7 different chemical engineering departments. Just a host of different ones, materials. I don't know if you know Carbon 3D out in Silicon Valley. That was an NC State professor. We also have UNC, our rival down the street. Chapel Hill has the highest number of PhDs per capita in the world. So there's an immense amount of intellectual capital. That's one piece of it. The second piece is Raleigh is a place where people retire. And so I've had a wealth of executives and leaders work with me that had a full, vibrant career in their space that want one last adventure with the kids. And so my first CTO of Tethys was a PhD at MIT, was CEO of a publicly traded company, was looking for one more thing to do. And I managed to hold on for 5 years before he had, too many grandkids. So I love the fact that the network is there. What's not there so much as capital. I wish there was more, but the people, both in terms of technical talent and just experience, they all come to Raleigh, which is great.
And is there also an ecosystem of creation and scale? Because you need both, right? You can create a good idea, but then you need the tollers and you need the creator, the people who will do that. Is that present as well?
It's mixed. There's in Charlotte, about 2 hours away, there's the Polymer Center of Excellence. So we're able to scale up a lot of our thermoforms materials. You're familiar with the group. So we do a lot there. A lot of the paper companies have installations there. I was across the street from Dumtar for my diaper company. Didn't even know it. I managed to coax them over with Chick-fil-A to look at my material. So they ate chicken nuggets and said, that actually works. So there's some, is there a grand track record of material excellence? I wish there was. I'm kind of pioneering it. Unfortunately, the Carbon 3D story is the more common story, which is a great inventor moves to Silicon Valley. I find that very expensive, and I don't like Silicon Valley as much as I like Raleigh. So I'm trying to...
I've heard that's a great area, but we're digressing to that because I've heard it's a great area, so I'm going down that alley. Yeah. Instead, I want to give you hope. And the hope comes from our own experience. So we launched molded fiber products in India about 8 years back. And when we went in, we had no clue about this. We were a wrapping and carry kind of pulp and paper producer. And we really wanted to do something in the space of polystyrenes and styrofoam. And that's how we went in. And typically when you went to the market, all they wanted was round white plates. It had to be white and it had to be round. I said, doesn't make sense. Why would we bleach a fiber and lose another 5 to 8% of yield? Plus add in chemicals which could potentially be harmful. It's still, dioxides and things like that. So we said, let's challenge this. And we went brown. And we didn't even understand the idea of round. So we said, you can give a better area for eating food. Yeah. By not being round, you can still be kind of nice looking and cornered edges and stuff, but you can be more in the squarish side. And we introduced it, and there was an uphill struggle. But as time has passed, it's the reverse. Anybody who wants to enter the Indian market now wants to copy our products. So they have to be brown now, and they have to be our design. It's literally our brand is called Chuck, and they say it's Chuck design. So don't lose heart on the black one. So stay with it. I'm sure people will appreciate. I personally think the brown looks so much nicer.
I do too. I think it makes a statement. I will say I really admire what PACA does in terms of the clarity of your mission. You've been 4 areas that you really focus on. We kind of hit at least 3 of those. But I think standing by what you believe is really, really important, because if you just compromise, if all we did was do a fake plastic sushi tray, the consumer would miss it. And I think there's a variety of things that are not happening. I will tell you, Ved, that my designer did not allow me to bring my favorite materials because she's filing some design patents that are not rectangular.
Oh, nice.
They are a different shape
Yeah.
because she had a
And
bit.
so she's around typically. I hope she's kind of taking that into consideration.
She's doing a variety of different shapes, and they're amazing. And I look at it and I think it gives me different. It's not just a sustainability value proposition. It looks new, and I like that a lot. So I appreciate you telling me that story. It's amazing how things get kind of stuck. Like, why do we keep doing the same things over and over and over again?
And why would you want it to look like a cheap plastic? Like there is no reason. And there will be takers. I find that it just takes a little push and conviction, and then things start to alter. And in fact, take fancy, right? They become the talk of town. That otherwise, you've just introduced another. You are another commodity player who can be replaced easily.
You're controversial, then you're the burb. Huh?
Exactly. So looking at the raw materials, and especially because, the dissolved product is in the market and it's already commercialized, how difficult or easy have you found the supply chain on the raw material side? Has that been pretty standard? You mentioned earlier that you only look at, established raw materials. So in terms of building that, has that been easy? And I read somewhere on your website, it's more seaweed, alginates kind of based. So has that been easy to source, or is that a challenge?
It's been fairly easy with the caveat of the global tumult that we're in. Some of our materials are not as they're not as strong with U.S. sources, so that's a very strong interest for us. In fact, we have a number of our competitors that are European based that have contacted us about co-locating because of that, tariffs and just the uncertainty in the market. In general, we try very hard to make sure that what we're using is really truly commodity. Where I think we want to go that is a little bit harder is we can use ag waste, things like wood flour. We had a canned fruit company come to us about they want to destroy a piece of the outer layer of their fruit, and right now they burn it because they don't want to lose their IP. We can turn it into structures for them, that kind of thing. That's a difficult supply chain to set up.
Yeah.
And so, I want that same 100K tons that you do if we're going to do that. And then while we do focus on commodity, there are really fascinating novel materials out there that we are interested in potentially scaling up as a 2.0 kind of play. So we have IP from Purdue that involves nanocellulose, for example. I'm not going to lead with that until I know I can make a lot out of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, we need to be able to make a lot of it. So part of why we're here in Europe is we know there are early stage technologists that perhaps could use our services to scale up. They're using it for something else. And so we'll look at those novel materials if we can look you in the eye and say, we know exactly how it's going to be made.
Yeah.
Right now, it's the commodity, I want to talk to the Cargills and the ADMs of the world and the biggest of the big and the most basic of the basic on everything. We're working on it.
No, I think that's a good direction to go in. The other statement I read was, when you look at your materials, it's low cost, naturally derived starch and celluloses. So, and I wanted to focus on the low cost side, because that again becomes a challenge, because there is a certain belief when we look at renewable and regenerative materials that people start with this idea it's going to perform poorer and cost more. How do you look at that, and how do you look at that statement itself?
I mean, I think that's generally true. I mean, unfortunately, and this kind of gets back to, what you were talking about in terms of what the consumer wants or what the supplier thinks the consumer wants. And I think the old classic saw that Steve Jobs talked about, which is that the consumer doesn't know what they want. Here's how I think about it. I think cost is more important than performance. I think performance can be over-engineered. And I learned that in the diaper industry, where I found that the test for how well it held onto urine would work in a spaceship. I mean, they were using immense centrifugal force in a clothes dryer that simply no human baby would ever experience to cause the material to break down. So, sufficiency is what I'm targeting. Is it sufficient for the task at hand? And so, everybody thinks they want something like plastic until they want it to not be like plastic. I had a car company call us up, and they wanted a wrap that would last for 2 years perfectly just like plastic, and then with the drop of a hat instantly disappear, never to be seen again. And that's not a realistic objective. And so I was like, you're going to spend years on this. Where can we compromise? And the answer was, we don't know, because we're just afraid. And so what I try to push our team towards is, let's make sure we stay within range of cost and performance, It can't fail. You can't get the consumer to change behavior, but I think it's possible there are intermediaries that have over-engineered it. Because if you look at, how disintegrated this supply chain is for most of these things, there's an engineer at every one of these companies whose job is to make sure that that doesn't fail. And so some of that is an ongoing conversation. Now, do our materials hold up? They absolutely do. This works just as well as the synthetic. And so, knock on wood, I just know that in general, biomaterials, I mean, they're designed to break down. If something is biodegradable, it will break down. And so we have to work with the end user on that. If you're switching to a biodegradable alternative, just know it's not going to last on the shelf for 100 years. For the way, that's a good thing, because that means it's not going to be in the dump for 100 years or 1,000 years.
Yeah, and you mentioned a fascinating thing, which was basically that you want to focus more on the cost side and then the performance. And that's really important, because we end up in so many conversations where the stumbling block becomes that initial price, right? So if we can take that, in fact, I was talking to one of the biggest food delivery chains in India, and the CEO and me again hit it off, and we had a lot of open conversations. He said, okay, let's work together on taking price off the table. And then what we can do is, in our app, we can give the discounts to the restaurant, we can put in some money, we can provide the customer with a certain kind of sustainability rating and further kind of price. She said, I thought it was so wise. How do we take off the price discussion totally off the table? But the other challenge we face is that the user, the customer, is so used to certain parameters. And you're right, it's mostly over-engineered. And we see that all the time. But the spec sheet we will get is, come to us when you meet this. So how does one get them to get into a conversation and say, let us do a trial? But the trials are like 6 months, right? So you have to get funded for that long to survive.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
Well, for me, and this may not work for a company of your size, but we lead with the health issue a lot, which is, okay, that's how you currently price and perform things, but you're also exposing your customers to more microplastics in their brain. And so we try to pick battles where there's clear blue sky. You may have to compromise, but you're not going to be poisoning the end user with the things the choices that.
And does that work?
It does.
To the purchase manager?
There is a lot of fear in the market right now. PFAS is a major concern. Microplastics are a big concern. I think you can see a total political shift here in the United States with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And was recently at a packaging company, actually giving a speech.
And he's against all these chemicals for sure.
Absolutely. And so there's a vague sense of dis-ease, not disease. And so if we're providing an alternative that is within the realm of cost and performance that alleviates that concern from you, you will find us piloting. Will that work forever? No, but I think it's really necessary, because I do think, the more I read about black plastic, the more I'm outraged as a U.S. citizen that we've allowed that to happen for this many decades, that there's vestigial chemicals from the 1960s still being recycled into our food contact materials is an outrage. And so we talk about that a good bit when we open our conversations, which is we're going to need that from you. And the cost is you're going to have to take a little bit of time with us to scale up, but we're going to be realistic about our costs and our performance with you, so you know what you're going to get.
Good. So what we see with customers, actually cost is a misnomer. It's the value creation, right?
Yeah.
So do you have examples of that where you would have sat in front of a customer and they talked about your product being more costly, but you could have created more value, apart from the bit of the plastics, microplastics being there. Let's take sustainability and health out.
Yeah.
And if you look at it purely from a product standpoint, have you had the chance to be able to explain to the customer that, hey, our product creates more value for you in this way? Has that been something that you've come across already?
Well, you've taken my two strongest arguments off the table. It's a little bit difficult for me to do that. I think the closest to what you're describing is the pod. And so the pod opens up edible avenues. So whether or not you can eat PDOH is debatable. You probably shouldn't. People don't want to. We open that up. We open up new product categories to, CPGs that are already in that edible space or nearabouts. So that's a great example. there's some premiumization. So you're in the molded fiber space, being able to, etch and mold or create, imprints using thermoform, we have more of a plastic type feel. So there's a premiumization. Is that the number one thing that people talk to us about? No, we want to. We have designers. I have a bunch of ex-Nike people working for me now, and tell me art is important. Yeah, which is new for me. I really love it. My CTO came out of Nike, and so she brought some people with her, and they're great. So, adding those design elements with our material is a premiumization thing that we can discuss. It ends up probably being third or fourth behind the health and sustainability, but
yeah, and the brand, definitely. A brand promise is definitely an interesting aspect. One of our chair of the board, and he was telling me this story where they were trying to create a new board for soap boxes. And basically, it was going to cost double of what the current market price was for the product. And he didn't talk to the purchase guys. He went and talked to the marketing guys. And what he did was he printed their soap, it was Dove, and he put it on the shelf. And he said, which one will you buy? Yeah. And ultimately, the packaging cost is 5 or 6% of the total. And even if it went to 8%, it didn't really matter to the marketing guy because he felt that the offtake will be higher. So I thought that was a brilliant way to do it, right? Where you talk to the people, it matters. And he actually sold it at like 150% of the current substrate. So he actually sold it. We get worried about 10-20%, right? And he actually managed to sell effectively, and it became the brand in the whole industry.
I believe it. I'll give you a story from NC State. So they did a study of toilet paper, and they found that toilet paper on a per pound basis is more expensive than a BMW.
Oh.
And the difference between the least good toilet paper and the most good toilet paper from a mechanics perspective is negligible. Bad toilet paper and good toilet paper, I mean, from class to class it changes, but what changes is good design, good branding. And that would send, sometimes 150% change in price because the value the consumer perceived around it.
Yeah.
And that's something I've remembered for years. I mean, Joel showed me the data. I'm like, that's just incredible. I mean, you never think about toilet paper being that expensive.
Yeah, especially when you're toilet papering somebody's house or something.
Yeah, I think the joke. Back when I was a kid, we used to throw toilet paper and eggs at our enemies. I had inflation. We don't do that anymore.
Yeah. I read somewhere you're also working with foams. Is that something that is in coming soon? What is it? What do you mean when you say you're working with foams?
We acquired two different families of two different professors approaching the problem of expanded polystyrene.
Okay.
It's a little bit further down our pipeline just because we're so busy with foams and coatings, but we have made functional prototypes for an automotive company. One is starch-based and one is cellulose-based, basically.
Okay. So it's like cellulose acetate.
Acetate. A little bit of that. Yep. So, I mean, so that one's a little bit further out, but we do have functional prototypes. We do share them with people. They're just not, we don't have that commercial pathway nailed as much as we would like.
And that's why I mentioned that, is I think it's an area that needs to be worked on. There is a lot of functional properties in foams and styrenes that can be replicated in substances. Nature has a lot of foam as well. I think of the pomelo fruit, right? And there's such a beautiful structure of air pockets, and it can fall from 10 meters and nothing happens. And so I just think that, there is so much of protective packaging built in. So it'll be interesting to have some company work on.
I think that is a good example of where you do need a partner just because of the huge scale, the volume. EPS scale is so high that there's no credible bio-based foam maker can come to you and say, we're cost competitive without bringing scale into the story, right? We will have to scale up. And so that one, you really do need a great partner to say, okay, I get it. If this was the machine of the sufficient size, the economics would be there. And so, let me look at the cost of materials and extrapolate out. If you have somebody with that kind of vision, we have something like that. But you do have to have the vision because that is just an incredible volume, material. And it's at the end of its innovation cycle. There's been very little innovation in EPS and
there is people doing great work. We had John Fels from Cruise Foam on our show, and it's incredible what those guys are doing. And it's a blend of stuff, but chitin oriented. And then we have a similar path. We have one of his
enabling patents from NC State. I acquired. Actually, the first Tethys patent was a chitinous starch foam.
Yeah, yeah.
So I've been in that area forever. I think the other thing we do is somewhat unique. Is some of those foams have barrier properties innate to them, but because we have barrier technology as well,
Can add that. Yeah.
yeah, that's where we sit. And so it may even be that one day we talk to Cruise Foam about, hey, we have these foam enabling technologies that are compatible, that are bio-based. And so we try to have that selling pickaxes to miners mentality on some of that with it. It's not immediate for us. So we have them. They're a little bit further out. I think it's I agree with you, it's such a huge opportunity. We've had, like I mentioned, car companies call us, and we don't have a lot of foam on the website. And they're all, I mean, and I get it. I mean, it's not something you want to be associated with.
Yeah. Okay, I want to switch to funding, because obviously you're taking these bunch of startups and trying to scale them. And of course, you need to keep TerraSafe going and all of that. How do you look at it? Do you try and get funding for each of these startups as you go along, or you get it into a central kind of engine and that kind of disperses? What is the structure and what is the kind of funders you look for?
Well, this is actually our first time raising outside money, if you can believe that. So the venture fund cumulatively has put in about $10 million into Dissolves and TerraSafe. Okay, we merged together. So in terms of what I'm thinking about, ideally, I'd like to raise our next large amount of funding on the back of being either cash flow positive or pretty close to it. So I'm doing a bridge round now to get there.
Okay.
So between laundry sheets and laundry pods, I have a pathway to get there this year. So it'll be a fairly small round. It's probably on a convertible note structure. Or, hey, we don't know where it's going to land. To get to your question, it really gets at who is investing, right? And so could you do the spin-out model? Absolutely. My liquor company, we ended up spinning out brands and raising outside funding into those. Could be that we do that. It could be that we keep it all in one shop and raise as one unified number. At this point, I think that's a big negotiation with the investors that I haven't had yet.
Yeah.
I would prefer to keep it all in one. It's very difficult to do cap table management unless you're just totally exiting it, see you later. And I think that's possible once you get it to commercialization. I think our team is really great at getting you a working, recurring property that you can consume. After that, it may make sense to spin that out and bring in the real MBAs as opposed to the fake ones like me. So it's a debate I have with my CFO a lot. I hate the lack of clarity when I'm fundraising, but that is where it is. Are we a venture studio? Are we an incubator? Are we a roll-up play? And those are all different types of investors we're all talking to right now. I love the idea of having strategic investors in this particular case because just the scale. Like if I know, partner A can take my trade coverage to market, and I kind of know that's taken care of, and they've invested in us. They're incentivized to do that. And that's a great model too. So we'll see. Right now, I'm just trying to get us to that break even number on a fairly small round, and then do a larger one and keep kind of rolling over.
That seems rather clear. It's not that part. It's a convertible instrument, and okay, and this is how we can go about it, and hopefully keep it central, and then allocate as the technologies emerge.
And I think what's been really neat about this one is it's really it's set up to endure. The team wants to work with each other, and I've never I've built many teams now, and this team wants to keep doing this thing over and over and over again. So if I can structure it in such a way that they're incentivized to keep playing the game, then it could be around for a long time, and maybe it spins things out, maybe it doesn't. And so I need investors that catch that vision. And so I try to bring them to the facility in Raleigh as quick as I can. Like, you need to meet this team. They're incredible. I'm just here to make sure that the lights stay on.
Yeah.
And so if I find visionaries that want to come in on that, I think we've got a great play. There's a plain Jane vanilla, we're a material startup, Series A kind of model we can do, and that's fine too. But fortunately, I have investors that are really they're into this. In fact, they've asked us to do a panel tomorrow where we're talking about this kind of crazy model. Now, they've been a little bit more focused with startups after mine. We were the guinea pig, but so far they've been very supportive of, like, try the spin out, try the roll up, try all those things to see what happens.
Yeah, it's amazing to get people like that who get it. You could want to enable more ideas to come out. Like when you said in the beginning, like you wanted them to be clear, and they were like, nope, just go and try. And that's amazing. Like, who does that?
I keep waiting for this shit to drop. They take, they have a number of LPs that are, big corporates. Sustainability and packaging are a big issue. They have funders that want to fund rural startups. They found a great team, and they largely get out of the way, which is, unfortunately, I think the best marker of a great investor, that and being inquisitive.
Okay, so two products, which are one product is already out in the market, the other is coming out.
Yep.
How do you see customer adoption and marketing side of it? Is that something that is, the word gets out there and you get customers lining on your door, or is it a little more tough than that? And how do you make them change into, okay, guys, get out of PVA, get into this. Sure, there is benefits, and hopefully the cost challenge is not that high. So how do you market it? How do you get early adopted?
Well, we're fortunate on these to be in kind of an unmet need space for quite a while. So when we acquired Dissolves, the founder we found had built a pipeline of over 250 engaged companies, with some of the biggest in the world to mom and pops. Applications that would blow your mind. My favorite being tie-dye t-shirts and a rectally administered horse medication, which I will not be there for that demo. I'm going to skip that one. And so what Jared, who is our chief product officer now, I think about half of his day is just apologizing to customers that haven't got their stuff yet. So the way we did our marketing strategy is we knew there was going to be some bumps and scale up. We knew that we needed to prove that we had something real. So we launched something we call the early adopter model. And what we did was we went to some of the most promising the most engaged early customers and said, look, let's go through a program together where you give us a little bit of money and we will get you the first dibs of the prototypes. And within 48 hours, we were 5 for 5. Yeah. So not a huge amount of money. And all 5 of those have converted to the next, compatibility testing, those kinds of things. So they've all come back to
these are different products or same product, different used in different applications.
Coffees and proteins and all kinds of.
Well, you could have instant coffee pods as well, like instead of the so this, as you said, coffee.
See, that to me is the mark of it. When you were talking about platform materials, what I want to have happen is when the cameras go off and you close the screen down, you're going to think of plenty of other things with it, and that's how I know we've got something. And that's my favorite part is, have you thought about this? Yeah, about that? That's where you know it. We actually did make a coffee and creamer pod on Friday.
Wow.
Yeah.
And imagine how easy it would be for airlines and stuff like that. Well, I guess they're doing the brewing, but otherwise they could just give you 2 of those and say, just put it in a cup and shake it out.
It was that one that inspired us, and the other one, and I'm going to just ruin all good things for you. Hotel coffee machines are never cleaned. They're disgusting.
Interesting.
And so even the Keurig.
Actually, I know that. You know why? Because I never drink coffee and I drink hot water. So each time I just put water in and I'm going to heat it up and I see that it's coming out all brown. I'm like, okay, I'll have to do a few rounds before I take water.
Yeah, we're all travelers, and we're like, you know what? I don't want to do that anymore. So I'm just going to bring my instant pot of coffee and creamer. It dissolves in about 19, 20 seconds. Like hot water, it's real fast. Completely dissolves. So that's what we did with our early adopter model. The sheets were a little bit different. We have a limited capacity. We have about 25 million sheets we can sell this year, which is not a small number. But so we've gone to some of our early customers and said, you want exclusivity? It's very easy. You just buy 25 million sheets. And so after that, scaling up will take a more rigorous marketing program. I'd like to build that out in the context of an A round. So I'm trying to have everybody sort of pitch in as their side job on the marketing for now, just to meet that unmet need. I think things like the trays and the substrates, that's going to take a little bit more work. And then there's the question, I know I keep branching off, the question of, do you sell the finished tray or do you sell the pellet that's extrudable or 3D printable or geometric moldable? Because we actually do that. We have a whole array of them and they work really well. So do you just sell those? And that's a totally different marketing, totally different approach. So we're exploring those. So right now it's really just sort of word of mouth of, hey, you called up Jared back in 2019 and it's finally come due. Are you interested? And that's been going pretty well.
Yeah, and I think what I've found, at least with companies, it depends on the direction you want to head in terms of your pellet versus the blown structure. And then lots of people want to do scale, like I know NatureWorks, for example. NatureWorks wants to do multiple of 100,000 kind of an idea. And they know they cannot do materials then. So they do pellets, but they display a lot of materials, right? Every time you go to a NatureWorks stall in any exhibition, you'll find that there is multiple displays of products that can be made from those pellets. So, and of course, and then there are people who want to do the finished products. They love design and they want to play with compounding and all of that. So yeah, so that'll depend on the direction we take. One thing I did want to ask you on the product, when I see your sheets, they are way thicker than the ones that are in the market. The ones in the market are more paper-like. Is there a reason for that, or is this a prototype and then it'll...
Those laundry sheets?
The laundry sheet, yeah.
We have some control over these. Are pretty early in. It's the thickness is something we've debated. How important to the consumer is flexibility and that kind of thing. Let it may not be. Yeah. And then there's a question of the ingredients you put in there. We have some more control over things like what enzymes can survive the process if we have more thickness. So there's some variability there. Is it a weakness? We don't think so. There are some other kind of quasi-bio-based ones that are strengthened.
I guess weight won't be a challenge anyway, so it's not like, you're shipping a lot of materials.
No, there's very little air. I don't know if you've seen the package, these things. Oh, you use them. Yes, they're great for e-com kind of applications. Yeah, we've even mocked up some novel delivery bot, type mechanisms. Yeah, because we have a designer. Yeah, she's reinvented the box, and she's great. I'm like, did we need to reinvent the box? She's like, yes. I trust her.
Nice to have people.
She's brilliant. Yeah, she does great work. But
and so of course people are coming out with similar products, and we've seen edible edible polymers being used in even the London Marathon and things like that. And of course, so how do you see these the quote unquote competition as we go forward, where there is similar applications that are being developed? How do you see yourself differentiating from them?
The biggest differentiator that we have identified is really that question of scale. And so, having scaled up a novel material that had custom manufacturing as part of it with Tethys, I do not want to ever do that again. And so my understanding of some of our competitors in the pod space is that they require their own equipment to make the pod. If you are going to be using pods at any kind of volume, there are half a dozen pod makers around the world that if you can't use their existing machines, it's a waste of time. And so when I go to trade shows and the like, I name drop the name of the person that we've run on their machine, and that kind of clicks the door. The London Marathon, when I believe you're talking about, has some stability issues that I think would be unlikely to survive in a commercial environment. I think that
it's short life, kind of.
Very short. Yeah, very short. Yeah, ours are designed to exist in the standard Mylar bag for pretty standard amount of time, as opposed to event based kind of. Out about it. I think it was a good showing. I love that the liquid one. Yeah, we also focus almost exclusively on powder. Now, because
you don't do liquids so much.
Not yet. Okay. Now we've merged a pod company with a company that does barriers and films, and so you can imagine that being in the pipeline one day. But yeah, really the powders and that's a multi-billion-dollar opportunity for us. That we could focus on the liquid, but and I want to do a cocktail because my liquor background.
Yeah,
that's exactly what I took up to.
Single malts.
We have the world's most award-winning American single malt.
Oh wow,
liquor company. Yeah. So, So that the scalability we have, I believe that's a key Rubicon moment for pods. Is did you run on an existing pod line? And so there's that, and then the general stability of the material, and then actually.
You're so right about the brain going, oh, you could use it for this. Oh, you could use it for this. My brain is already like, there are so many applications that could be kind of edible, pop it in, like you have.
I was on the acquisition side. We had to hang up the phone because we were like, the price is going to go up if you keep imagining new ideas. And so, no, it really does captivate the imagination. In fact, LinkedIn, I love this list. It was the 10 key innovations for 2025, and edible films was one of them. AI was the other. So,
wow.
Yeah, there's AI, then there's, edible films somewhere way here. Come on, we're on it. So,
they just didn't get the positioning right. It should
Not the valuation.
yeah, it's the what impacts the earth more is something that we have to look at. More energy usage or different carbon impact. So
that's a conversation that's going to be a long one for AI.
So we can take that off the camera. So let's move towards the closure. So if you look at scale, how do you see TerraSafe and Dissolve in the next 5 years? And what would be your dream come true?
Well, we have a 60,000 square foot facility and a pilot line up and running. We're capable of running probably another 5 full scale lines, varying types. So that's either melt blown, injection molded substrates, or more sheets and pods. What I imagine in 5 years is that we have brought in some of our outsourced manufacturing to that facility, but that we are, in the billions of pods and sheets, and somewhere in the millions or tens of millions of units on substrates, and hopefully with a clear evidence of a replicatable pipeline, because like I said, the team just really likes bringing things to market. That's what they're really great at. And so there are other things that we've acquired that are further back, or other things that we look at, and we want to be the known provider of choice for disruptive technology for packaging. And so we want to be the first call of, hey, we're having trouble with this, and our team is like, well, we either have it or we don't have it. We're going to go get it for you. We're going to help you out. We want to be that person you call. And so that to me would be a great career, great job to have.
I'm going to add on to that one because I just wanted to continue to absorb the excitement.
Yeah.
And so if you were to choose 3 new products which are in the pipeline to scale, what would your choices be? That these are the 3 I really want to see succeed in the next 5 years.
That are not pods.
That are not pods. There are no soap application.
Then next. Our PFAS alternative.
Okay.
Because
and that's a coating alternative.
We do a coating and we do a film version.
Okay.
So that's one. We own that one. We own elements of nanocellulose, which someone who's been in the fiber-based world, it's been long for a solution. And we have some really interesting patents that need a nanocellulose. I would love to find a way to bring that at scale. And we've got a couple things we're playing around with. I'd love to send you some sheets at some point. I can't tell you where I got them from, but we're trying to bring that in. That'd be number 2. And then number 3. I think the EPS alternative. I mean, that if you want to talk about an impact,
nice. I like that it's in your 3.
Yeah, I mean that's such a huge impact, and I've been making my bones as an entrepreneur on what percentage of dumps are made up of the thing I'm trying to replace for over a decade. And that just the volume of this, just to keep your thing from getting dented, it's a tragedy. And so if we could bring that, now there are some cruise foam is very competitive in that space, and so they may beat us there, and I'm okay with that, but.
They are in one application. They are focusing on a certain area.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. They're neighbors to us, as it turns out. I found out. So, I think those would be the 3.
Nice. Thank you for that. So, of course, you've answered this, but I have to ask again, and maybe you can expound on the earlier answer. What does good garbage mean to you?
I have 2 answers on that. The best garbage is no garbage. And so, that's what this year is about, is bringing things to market that you don't have to worry about throwing them away. To me, good garbage is garbage that you can look your children in the eye and say, I didn't hurt you.
Nice. Love it. Succinctly put, as we would expect a poet to. So thank you so much, Scott. This has been such a delightful conversation. Thank you for the work you're doing. And of course, thank you so much for doing this in person. So much more fun.
Thank you for having me. This was a blast.
Thank you for listening to the Good Garbage podcast. Follow us on social media to never miss an episode. Links are in the description below. I'm your host, Ved Krishna. See you next time.